Welcome to the Rising Woman Leaders podcast. We are a sisterhood of women stepping into courage, self-love, and feminine leadership. I'm your host, Meredith Ram, and here I'll be sharing personal insights as well as interviews with inspiring leaders and entrepreneurs so you can create more daily magic in your life and also grow your business without losing sight of spiritual values as a rising woman leader. If you like this podcast, use our hashtag Rising Woman Leaders, follow me on Instagram at Meredith Ram, and sign up for email updates at risingwomanleaders.com. You'll receive all the new and inspiring content, including insights I only share on email. Now get cozy with a cup of tea, light a candle, and grab a journal to listen to this week's magical radio podcast. Welcome back. This is Meredith Ram, and I'm here today with Luna Love, who is a woman's leadership mentor, assisting those called to be change makers in the world, achieving clear vision for their lives by providing supportive, life-promoting experiences, practical tools, and spiritual wisdom to align one's divine essence, authentic expression, and life purpose. Luna creates transformative experiences for her clients through the power of self-awareness and self-love. And most of all, Luna is devoted to walking her path in the beauty way. Welcome, Luna.
Thanks so much for having me, Meredith. I'm super excited to be here with you and your audience today.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just so grateful months ago when we got to drop in with each other on your podcast, Ladies Who Lead. And I wonder if you could just share with us a little bit about that community you've been creating and what your experience of having your own podcast has been.
Yeah, I'd love to. Ladies Who Lead is it's like my fun project in my business. There's no expectation of return. I don't focus on it as an income stream. And so it's just like my fun project to get together with amazing women who I'm either friends with or inspired by or reach out to in the world who want to participate, where we can really get into storytelling and sharing of our own human experiences in a way that inspires others. And the real intention is to kind of highlight that everyone has an I can't voice inside of their head. And what the podcast really invites forward is, okay, yes, and look at all these amazing women who have achieved beautiful lives and visions and dreams for themselves, who rise above that voice, who have the courage to allow that voice to not rule their lives. And it's really kind of put that way to inspire other women whose gifts are really needed, who might be blocked from sharing them or stepping into them because of that I can't voice. And so my hope, and I know that the podcast really supports women and people in just getting over those blocks and seeing that their gifts are needed and seeing the value of what they have inside of them. And so it's been such a blessing for me to not only connect with people I love and admire, but also to connect with our listeners and hear their takeaways and their experience of the podcast and how it affects their lives in a positive way and gives them permission to kind of just step into their greatness in a new way that maybe they wouldn't have been inspired to do had they not heard someone's story that really touched them or resonated with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love what you shared about the I can't voice. That is so true. We all have it, and we all have to really be present with ourselves and to create the space to take steps forward, even though it's there. I remember I used to think like these people who are doing amazing things, like, oh, there's no way they could have the same like doubts or fears that I have. How has your journey been with that, the I can't voice, and what has helped you to rise above it?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey, the way that you put it. I'm a person who from a young age, and this is kind of carried around in my life, I'm very much like, I can do anything. Like if I wanted to like start a whole new career and like become a graphic designer and work for a firm or a company, and like I could put together a portfolio and get a job that's well paying within like a few weeks. Like that's just the type of person I am. And in some ways that's like I've kind of created this idea that like I'm really good at a lot of things, but in the past I've kind of thought like, but I don't really excel in one arena enough to like be at the top, but I can like make it within the scope of what it already exists easily, because I can like build a skill set and use what I already have. And so I've had kind of like a mix of limitlessness and that's been my approach to life. And inside my head, which is less maybe shown in my personality or shown in the ways that I show up in the world, is the voice. So even though I've kind of approached life of like, I can do anything, I'll make it happen. It might take a little while, but like I'm willing to wait the time. Kind of being okay with it not going the way that I planned has been a great gift in my life, to just welcome and receive whatever the highest good is, and trusting that whatever comes my way is so in service to me. And sometimes I can take that voice and kind of go into a tailspin in my mind of like, oh no, it's not going to work out and it's not going to go as planned, but I still do it.
I'm just noticing that some of the things you were saying is such a useful skill set for being an entrepreneur, and coming back to that attitude of just like, I can do it and I can take those steps forward, even though it's like, I can figure this out. And I remember, I think it was from Marie Forleo, where she had an episode where it was like, you can Google anything, like like having that mindset of like, I can figure this out. And I can just imagine with the everything that you've created in your business, of, you know, from the podcast to your site and to your programs and your events, like just having that attitude has really brought you far. I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. The other thing is like, what's the worst that can happen? You know, I think like that's a big thing I keep in mind, is just like, so I spend a little time and maybe money and energy working on something, and it doesn't go the way I want it to go. It's like, great, I'm going to learn something. It's like, if I don't kind of hold too much value in my own time and energy, and I trust my intuition, it's like, I'm not risking like my family. Like, it's just time and money. There's an abundance of both of those things. So like, what's the harm in just trying?
Mm-hmm. I remember that was the exact attitude I had when I was preparing to lead my first international retreat. And it felt so big and so scary and like unfamiliar. But at the same time, I was very practical with myself. And I was like, okay, literally, what's the worst thing that can happen? And I was like, oh, well, maybe I just don't get enough people to sign up. And I was like, okay, well, how much money would I lose on the deposit if that were to happen and I had to cancel it? And I was like, I'm willing to take that risk. And when we go all in, I really find, there is no failure. It's like, even just the act of trying is so courageous. You can't like say that was a failure.
Yeah. There's always something for us if we're willing to receive it, and we're willing to show up and just open ourselves to what the opportunity or the experience is going to give us. So that's, where I've kind of brought myself to in my life, is just, this is my heart and my intuition is telling me to go in this direction and say yes. And I have a rule about just like saying yes 110% to something, otherwise like not saying yes at all. And just that yes and that intuition is going to bring me something I need. And it could be heartbreak, but it's worth it. There's something there for me that I need.
Mm-hmm. How do you decipher and tune in to your intuition?
I love this question. My intuition is really kind and encouraging and guiding and very like willing to show me things in a way that I'm able to see and receive. There's just like a lot of grace, I think, is the theme in that arena. Is that there's a lot of grace in listening and receiving, and that doesn't mean that the answers always come quickly. There's often times where there's just a listening period, where there's a pause and there's nothing coming, and I have to be okay being in that space. And I find that with my ego or the energy of doubt, there's like constriction, contraction, like discomfort in my body, and or like I have negative thoughts. And so I'm acutely aware of the difference and how it feels in my body, and that I have the power to choose how I want to feel. And if I'm feeling that way, that I have the power to change my choices and my thoughts to bring me back to a place where there's more grace and opening. And so the more I've listened to the intuition and stopped listening to the voice of doubt, it's allowed the intuition voice to become louder and stronger and a bigger part of my life. We're always in conversation, and the other voice kind of gets quieter and less present in my life. And so that's been, just knowing that I have the power has been a really great shift for me.
It's like the more energy and attention you put towards that, quiet voice that might have been quiet in the beginning, it got magnified and louder, and now it's easier to connect to.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And I know so much of your work is about helping women align in their purpose and really feeling alignment in their lives and their businesses and their careers. And I'm curious about your story of like becoming a women's leadership mentor and a podcast host, and did you ever expect this to be your life? And how did you start to find that purpose-driven work?
No, I was a very masculine, abrasive, in-your-face New York fashion designer who was like very much, my social life was based around like magazine parties and models and photographers, and not a lot of like intimate, depthful relationships. And in 2008, when the economy was crashing, I had a great job that I liked, and they were moving to California. And they said, don't tell anyone else in the company, we're moving, and we want to take you with us and not anybody else. And so I had to kind of keep this secret quiet, and I got a raise and a paid move in a time when everyone was losing their jobs. And if I didn't go to California, it would be probably really, really hard for me to find a new job. And so I went, and the job actually changed a lot in a way that didn't feel supportive. And I ended up not staying there very long. And it was hard to find a job. And I worked freelance as a fashion designer, and I had a lot of time off and was unemployed, and I had a really expensive gym membership that I couldn't get out of the contract. So I spent all my time at this amazingly fabulous Equinox gym, and I got into yoga more in depthly. Like I had so much time on my hands, I would like go to 2 or 3 classes a day. and my life was like partying and like drinking bourbon and smoking cigarettes and like being in this like scene of fashion and art and music, and slowly it just started to shift to like I'm eating organic food and like not smoking as much and not hanging out with the same people and like doing more yoga. And it just like, it was slow, but it was fast, that shift, and my life just kind of changed. And I had a series of spiritual awakenings that just invited radical surrender. And I was just stopped fighting the intuition, the messages that I was being given that were always guiding me in this direction. And I had always been aware and had an understanding of this sense of oneness and infinity, and I didn't have a lot of people to talk about it who, in the world that I was surrounded in, and I would have these like separate pockets of friends and groups of people, and it was always a part of me, but it wasn't honored, it wasn't made, it wasn't put at the forefront of my life. And there was just an opportunity for me to say, I surrender. Like I put this at the forefront of my life. I put this becoming, this knowing, this spirituality at the forefront of my life, and not as this like thing off to the side. And when I did that, it was a radical shift. Like my life changed overnight. And it felt like it changed overnight. And at the same time, the progression of lifestyle, of like work related stuff, was slower. Like I started focusing on healing arts. I started teaching yoga, and my work has always followed what I'm stepping into in my personal arena. So I was working with a beautiful teacher and mentor specifically around women's work and women's shamanic mysteries around like our bodies and the mystery of birth and death and menstruation. And I started teaching courses and working with women and leading circles, and it was more around that. And then the next phase of my own life presented itself, and it shifted. So like when I was working in developing my, like yoga was my jam, that was where I kind of focused my service work. And so every step of the way has kind of been like invitation and personal mastery. And then as I step into that, the opportunities to serve just come. And it's not a matter of exerting my own will as much as just saying yes to the opportunities that become available. And so I love what I'm doing, and I trust that it may stay in the arena of women's leadership, and it may evolve into something different. And I am focusing a lot on, I have a lot of clients that I worked with, women that I worked with one-on-one, that now want to do couples work. And I actually have a lot of couples clients, and I've been in a magical, amazing relationship. So it's kind of just like spirit just brings forward what I'm ready to be focusing on, and I just have to say yes. Mm-hmm. And so my journey has been that of saying yes. And in those stages before, when I had a lot of resistance to the opportunity spirit was sending my way, there was a lot of pain and depression, and I know so deeply what that feels like and what it was the result of, which was my denial of myself and my denial of connection, that any little speck of that comes in, I can like go to that place and feel that dissonance in my body so much that I've just kind of felt it enough to say like, okay, I'm not going to allow myself to go there for more than a moment that just is there to catch my awareness, to bring me back to center. And so that's been a huge gift of devotion that I've been able to give to myself and to my life, and I'm sure to the benefit of those around me as well, to not have to be bringing forward the energy of dissatisfaction and depression, and to really take responsibility for that myself.
Wow. It's so beautiful to hear your story and it sounds like such a natural evolution of just as you were learning and changing and growing, like your service changed and evolved and grew. And I just imagined just some times in my life when you said you were getting really into yoga, like lying in Shavasana at the end of a class and feeling that connection that you spoke of. And the more that began to happen, it was like something I could not deny, something that was, like you said at one time, not on the side, but you set this intention, like, I would like to bring this to the forefront of my life. And that was like the catalyst of everything around you beginning to shift. It's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And I do talk to a lot of women who are in those kind of stages of just like transitioning, and there can be a lot of confusion in those times of like, well, what do I do next, and what is my purpose, and what steps do I take forward, and how do I find my purpose, and what would you suggest to those women?
I love this analogy of, I grew up in the Northeast, and like I didn't grow up in Connecticut, but I remember going to visit friends and there being fog all the time on these windy forested roads where you couldn't see. So people like experience that in their own way. But when you're driving, it's like you kind of know your destination. Like there's an idea in our heads that says, I'm going to Julie's house or whatever it is. And there's the idea, but you can't really see the house. And you can barely see 10 feet in front of you. And so you don't know when the next curve in the road is coming. But if you drive 5 more feet, well, then you can see 5 more feet. And that to me is like, I don't have to know the how. I don't have to know when every curve is going to come or every opportunity or there's no way to know. All I have to do is take the next step. All I have to do is drive 5 feet. Because when I drive 5 feet or take the next step, that next opportunity or next curve or next whatever becomes a lot more visible, a lot more clear. And then I'm able to like decide if that's the place I want to go. And so it's like I try to focus on like it's not don't worry about the how. I find that so many of my clients and women get stuck in the like, but I don't know how. Like, okay, I have a kind of clear vision and idea, and I don't know how I'm going to make that happen. And sometimes it's just like the how is not important as much as the why. And if we can get in touch with our why, like, why is this so important to me? The how unveils itself. And if we trust that the why is valuable, the how will just show up. And then we can decide if we want to say yes to that how. So, like, the how will be like, you have to do X, Y, Z in order to make this happen. And before, you may have not known that how, but if you commit to the why and you believe that it's valuable and worth it to move forward, then you get to decide in the next moment, does this how feel like something I'm willing to do to achieve that result? Yes or no? And then you're brought in the next 5 feet, and then you can see the next how, and then you get to decide again, like, is this thing worth it? And sometimes that no brings you to a totally different path. And there's nothing bad about that, to like kind of quit something and start something else, because that's what was being presented to you. So I just focus on the why, not the how, because the how will unveil itself if you're willing and you believe that the why is worth it.
Yes. And that requires us a bit of letting go, because some of us really want to control and to be like, okay, if this is where I'm going, I need to know exactly what's going to happen in order for me to get there. And that was something I was just working with a client the other day, and it was like, well, let's break it down to a really small, tangible step that you can take. And like, let's just experiment with some of these different directions. And then you can see like what the next step is. And then you can, see which direction you want to go in. But that can be a challenge sometimes, like not getting caught up in the wanting to control the outcome and where it's going to go.
Yeah, for sure. And that's always the shift for me, is deeper trust in spirit, in the universe, for providing the next how and the next opportunity and the next invitation, and not needing to take that on myself. And that shift for me is like perpetual. And I think like, I'm like, everything's in alignment, I'm trusting so much, everything's in flow. And then the opportunity to like trust more, surrender more, invites itself forward. And it's sometimes really challenging, and it's never not been worth it. Like the result of trusting more and letting go of that control has always brought such radical blessings in my life. So over the course of collecting that data over time, it just makes the most sense to trust that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, having enough experiences where it worked out when you released those attachments. It's like, okay, this is really the best way to move forward. And that reminds me of just manifestation in general. It's like, yes, we can have a vision and be really clear about it and take those grounded action steps, but at the end of the day, letting go and just releasing that like grasp on what the outcome is.
Yeah, because we don't know if something bigger and better and more aligned than our imaginations could have ever thought of might come our way. And if we're stuck on this like very narrow vision, it's like we might not be open to receiving this other thing that's even more aligned and more powerful and more abundant. And that's really been an opening door in my life.
Yeah, I've been working a little bit with just some really simple prayers of like, if something feels like it's going the total opposite direction than what I thought or expected or feel upset, it's like, okay, like, thank you, universe, for helping me see creative solutions here. Thank you for helping me trust that this is for the highest good. And like that surrender, I find always really helps me to just come back into that state of love and trust. Whereas in the past, I know I could get really caught up in the things aren't going my way, and that can feel really constrictive and block a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about creativity as well. And I know that's also part of your work, just mastering the creative process and what that looks like in your life and how you help others with that.
This is one of my favorite places to dive into. It's I really relate to this energy of the muse as this energy of life that knocks on our door. And I think of it as this super sexy, sensual relationship where she's like, I pick you. Like, I want to co-create with you. I have this thing that wants to be birthed, and you're the one I want to make this creative baby with. And it's like a relationship, the way that we relate to the muse. And for me, this is the foundation of my creative process, is really just listening and attending to her. And how would I want to be met in my romantic relationships is how I want to meet her. So I want her to feel special. I want her to feel heard. I want her to tell me I want to know all of her, and I want to receive all of her. And as I've developed this relationship with the muse, this energy of creativity is so beautiful, because things come and I really get to like build a relationship with whatever is being birthed. And sometimes, as in my actual life, that's sometimes a long-term committed relationship, and sometimes it's just this thing that kind of happens fast and quick and easy, and that energy of whatever needed to come through that relationship happened. And it's like there was a service there, and it got birthed, and it's no longer needed to be cultivated. And maybe the muse finds somebody else who's more in alignment with that vision to go knock on their door and say, hey, this has been started and cultivated, and it's in this new place, and like now we get to dance and create something new. And when I think of it as like little romantic dots, and the connection points between those dots kind of moving and shifting in the world through all humans, and this beautiful energy of inspiration and creativity that comes through each of us and knocks on our door and says, hey, I believe in you. And she's seeing the potential in us. by coming to us and by bringing us these ideas in our heads and our hearts and our visions and our dreams. And she's saying, I believe in your ability to birth this. I believe in your ability to engage with me and be in this union in order to create this thing. And so when I believe in the value of whatever the potential creation could be, I really give my all. And it's a representation of my partnership and the way that I commit to that union as well. It's like this relationship with the muse, with inspiration, with life, with creativity is so meaningful and important. I want to show up 110% and make her, the muse, feel like she is just the most important thing in the world. And I think for me, relating to it in that way has really allowed me to tap into my body as a woman and my sensual nature as a woman that is, and in and of itself, the embodiment of creativity and creating life. And in that is death. And how do we relate to all these things is, for me, the creative process. It's like, this is life. There's projects that are going to be birthed and aborted and miscarried and fruitful and amazing and 10 fingers and 10 toes. Like, how do we relate to these things that we're creating? And how do we acknowledge the value? And how do we acknowledge the partner that's co-creating their creation with us, which is the muse, which is spirit, which is life? And is it honored in the way that we would want to be honored in our lives? And for me, it's brought a sense of like being turned on to my creations, to my business, to my whatever. Like, making dinner is a birthing, is a creation, and there's an energy of inspiration and excitement and spontaneity and that comes through that I can be excited and turned on about, that can just be woven into whatever that creation or meal or business or project or painting is. And for me, that's something I have a relationship, like, this is conceptual what I'm sharing, and it's a practice. And sometimes I see myself kind of just going through the motions of getting things done, and that's not present. And then I see how that's kind of in my relationship and in my life. I'm kind of just like in the motions of being and sharing this experience without really being like engaged and fully like, thank you so much for just like sharing this amazing experience with me. And that's how I want to live my life. And that's how I want to honor the people around me. And that's how I feel that you and I are co-creating now in this interview. It's just like, whether it's spoken or not, there's an energy of inspiration and gratitude and honoring the value and seeing one another that allows it to be something so much bigger than just like another interview.
I love this so much. And I've never thought of it this way. The creativity, like bringing in the romance with it. I've done this before with meditation, and that actually really, that concept helped me to have a sustainable daily meditation practice. Like, how can I bring in this sense of romance with it? But I'm bringing that into creative projects and business projects, like, of course, I want more romance in my life. That's such a beautiful way to approach everything we do. Like everything, from the business to even just cooking dinner. That is, like, it is all a creative act, and bringing that intention with it and gratitude. I'm just like, I feel like this is your secret, Luna. Like, I see you creating so much, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is it. This is like how you're able to hold that space and to really create in such a huge way.
Yeah, I went to a workshop. I don't remember when. I don't remember who it was with, but one of the people leading said the natural state of a woman is turned on. And at first I got like, I went to this place of like defensiveness of like, like there was an expectation of me as a woman to like show up turned on in the world like for someone else. And I was like, I don't like that. I don't like, it offended me that she said it. And then I like felt it in my body and I was like, this is so true. And once I honored and acknowledged that as true and honored my womanliness, it it's a way of relating to you know, brushing your teeth and making a meal and businesses and actual partnerships and podcast interviews and all of it. And I totally get that message all the time of like, I see you doing so much. Like, how do you do it all? And it's like, you know, like I don't know why I'm sharing this, but you know, sometimes when you're tired, and like the idea of making love, just like you're like, I'm tired. And then you get into that space like full wholeheartedly and energized. It's like knowing that that union is an energizing force and is going to support whatever you're creating, and having the willingness to expand ourselves even when there's an idea of like overwhelm or I'm doing too much or whatever it is. It's like our capacity to receive as women is really not about other people giving us things, but about our willingness to open and receive our unlimited potential. And like through that receptivity of our bigness, of our greatness, is for me where the energy comes from to create more projects and do more things and be in greater service orientation so that I can go volunteer and not just focus on my own thing. And that's been a huge shift. So yeah, I'm totally like happy to share the secret with everyone and anyone to be like, bring this energy into our lives more, because it'll change everything, and it'll change drabby, boring marriages that have, you know, lost their life. Like it's a personal responsibility.
I love the analogy too of just like there is, if we open ourselves to that creative life force and that union, the energy will be there, but we have to shift our perspective on it. And we have to stop telling the story like, oh, I'm so tired, I can't do this, and shift into that like, no, this, I'm open to this union and this act of creation. And that's like the energy rushes in. And I also like what you said about not doing it for anyone but yourself. Like this is, and that actually leads into the other question I wanted to ask you about, which is about inner marriage, which I wanted to hear your experience of that and what, you know, I just think it ties in really nicely of like doing something for yourself and making commitments for yourself. But I'm curious what that looks like for you.
Yeah. Well, you know, where I left off in the last piece was like, this could shift like a drabby, boring marriage where people are just in it because they believe they have to kind of stay in the situation. It's not, it's about personal responsibility and not waiting for somebody else to change to give us something. And for me, that sense of personal responsibility has allowed me to look at the codependencies that we have as all humans with our parents. Like psychologically, we all want our parents to show up in a certain way for us. And they're usually, it's an ideal. So they're usually incapable. Even people who have the most amazing childhoods, there's some level of like, I wished my mom or dad could show up this way, and they don't. And then eventually what happens as we age is that gets transferred. If that sense of personal responsibility isn't found within the time frame, eventually that projection of somebody showing up for us and taking care of us in a certain way gets projected onto the partner. And I've had a bunch of codependent relationships and seen the pattern and decided for myself that it's really about, I didn't want that in my life. And it's really about me being in right relationship with myself and being full and being like that the partner and the kids and all of that stuff that might come with it is just a bonus, and that I'm full and complete within myself. And so there was a time getting out of a really, really intense relationship that brought up a lot of grief and shedding of identities that I had attached to, that allowed me to really dive deep into myself. And so over the course of this time, I wrote out a list of my ideal partner. And then I said, okay, I'm not writing this list to call this person in. I'm writing this list to see where there's gaps in my relationship with myself and where I'm relying on somebody else or in like a future person to come in and be these things for me and give these things to me in my life. And I wrote it all out, and I kind of just looked at it and said, I'm going to be celibate, and I'm going to court myself, and I'm going to become this ideal partner for myself, because I know that that's the only way to attract this other person. And so I did that, and I didn't have a time frame, but it actually ended up being about 9 months, which is a birthing cycle. And I felt whole with myself. And I felt that I was showing up for myself in all the ways that I would want my ideal partner and or ideal parent and or whatever the projection is. And I was being that for myself. I was self-parenting, I was self-loving, I was all of the things of nourishment that I wanted to receive from another, I was giving to myself. And then I was going on a trip, and I said, I feel like I'm going to meet someone on this journey. And like 2 days into the trip, I met my current partner, and he meets that list almost 100%. And there's things that I couldn't even imagine that were on the list that he brings forward. And I know that I wouldn't be able to have received this relationship in my life had I not done that work. And that work doesn't end now that he's here. It continues because it's a service to the entity of our union as a third partner, as the relationship as its own entity, that I show up and give myself what I need in order to serve the whole. But my job is not to serve him. I'm not like here to do anything for him or be anything for him. It's to honor myself, to be in right relationship with myself in order to serve the relationship. And that has taken the codependency out of relating and given me the power to be in right relationship with myself. And so that means the masculine and feminine within myself, being in that inner marriage, so that I'm showing up to the relationship 100% as a whole being, rather than partially, or like not having cultivated the masculine within myself to meet my own feminine needs, that I'm relying on my partner to do so. But really how he's able to show up as being this amazing, generous bonus that I get to receive on top of what I'm already giving myself, which just makes me feel so much more nourished and supported and held and safe. And if he wasn't there for whatever reason, or the relationship ended, that I wouldn't be in lack of those things, that my sense of support and nourishment and love and safety and all of those things would still be there within myself, and that would be plentiful. And so for me, that's the inner marriage, is the personal responsibility. It's the self-parenting. It's taking everybody else off the hook of needing to show up for me in a certain way, and really giving it to myself, not out of a sense of responsibility, but out of a sense of like, I can give myself all of this. And so why not? It's just a self-honoring, self-love act to be in union and wholeness and marriage and devotion with myself.
Yeah. And everything else gets to be a bonus then. Like, it's when you're not seeking and holding and like, I need these things from you. It's just like, no, I'm this whole and complete being, and so are you. And everything above and beyond that is just like this beautiful bonus that we get to relish in.
And and releasing expectations. Like, I don't expect him or anyone in my life to show up in a certain way. They either do or they don't, and then I can make the decision based on how they're showing up to either bring it forward, have a conversation, ask for more, acknowledge them for how they're showing up. And if I get a pattern of someone in my life who's not, like, I don't have an expectation, but if I don't feel that this is honoring, that being in this relationship is honoring me, and they're not willing to change, then I simply have the power to remove myself from that. But that doesn't come from like, I expect or need you to show up like this. And so once that's been taken out of the relationship, it gives people so much more freedom to show up in the ways that they're able to, rather than in this confined vision or version of what the role that you need me to play for you is.
Mm-hmm.
I can just be myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and while we're talking about relationships, I'm curious if you have any little like tips or tools or exercises or anything you use in your relationship that could be helpful for other people.
Yeah. We haven't played this game in a while, but we have this game. And it's taken from Brene Brown. And I don't remember which book, but it's this game called I Made Up a Story That. And we just kind of set aside a few moments to say, and now we kind of do it in the moment, like when it comes up, rather than like setting aside time. But it's more just like, oh, I was making up a story that when you said this, you really meant that, and I took it personally, and I thought that you really thought this about me. And and they're like, and then you don't defend yourself or correct them, or you just say, oh, that's a good one. And and then that's it. And then the story's over. It's not verified, it's not acknowledged as truth, it's just spoken. And it creates a level of vulnerability, because sometimes there are these stories in our head that somebody does something and it means something about us. And when we can just kind of speak that, rather than letting it sit inside of us and kind of becoming, oh my God, they think this about me, and this is where he's at, and all these stories that we make up, when we can just speak them and say, I made up a story that, and be seen and witnessed in it, that takes a lot of courage to just speak those things. It takes a lot of vulnerability. It takes a foundation of feeling safe within yourself, feeling safe within the relationship. And the more that in the beginning of our relationship, when all of that stuff was kind of on the surface and there were all these stories, it's brought us to a place where like my mind doesn't even go there anymore, and I don't have to play that game. And now I can just, like, when it very few and far between when it does come up, I can say, oh, when you did that thing the other day, I made up a story that you really were saying this and it meant this about me, and you were upset about something I did. And then it's just all the charge that would have created like a mind tunnel of, negative thoughts and nonsense in my head just gets discharged. And we laugh and we smile and we acknowledge it and we have a big hug and we move on to the rest of our day, and it's gone. So that's one of the greatest things that we adopted from the magical Brene, who I love.
Yeah. The power of self-awareness, being able to identify those stories and just be like, oh, okay, that's why I was so upset, because, created this whole illusion, which may not have even been real.
Yeah, and the non-reactiveness of like, oh, that's so silly. How could you even think that? That's so not what I meant. Or just like, no, that's not what I meant. And like trying to console and trying to fix, or just not reacting to it. Or like, yeah, you're totally right. You were doing this thing and that is what I meant. And I was being, it's just not reacting. It's just totally being like, I see you in the story that you made up, and I love you. It's that provides the safety to do it again and be more vulnerable. It's just like the not needing to defend or react is just like,
yeah,
funny story.
So I wanted to ask you about facing fears. And I know, especially as entrepreneurs and stepping into life where you're of service and doing work in alignment with your purpose and following the intuition and divine guidance, that it's very common that fears and those doubts can come up along the way. And I wonder if you could tell us just a fear that has come up in the last year or two and how you worked with it and were able to face that.
I'm going to take a moment to just feel into what wants to come forward. The fear. I think for me, fear is really related to the meaning that I attribute to the stories in my head. So it's not like, I don't know when this will be aired, but I have an event coming up next weekend that may have already happened when this airs, but there's like things maybe no one will come or like maybe, the room won't be full. And like the fear is in the meaning. So if I can like take it a layer deeper, for me, there's something under that says, and then that means this about you, Luna. And the stories kind of change form. It might mean that I'm not important, or people don't care what I have to say, or like what I'm offering is not valuable. Like these thoughts pass through my head, and I have a pretty good practice of not feeding the fears. And so I'm able to kind of see them as little kids inside of myself, and just say like, oh, you're afraid, like you're allowed to feel that way. And maybe you act out in anger or quietness or distraction. And I have a good friend of mine, Joanna Green, who I love. She came on, she was a guest teacher on a Feminine Leadership Academy. And I have a practice with Gestalt therapy where it's like really relating to all the aspects inside of myself with a sense of, I see you, I see that you're afraid, and like it's okay that you feel that way, and we're gonna do this anyway because I'm in charge. Like you're not allowed to make decisions, but you're allowed to be here. You're allowed to come on the journey with us. And like while she loves that and while we could agree upon that, she's like, sometimes the aspects inside of yourself are like 22-year-old kids who are still living at home, who are not trying to get a job, and you need to kind of kick them in the butt a little bit more and not like baby them. And like I used to relate to life and people like that so much, of that like kind of hard, tough love, get your stuff together kind of thing, that I went to the pendulum of like kind of being over nurturing. And not that I think my approach is bad. It's just knowing that sometimes there's a fear or a doubt or an aspect inside of ourselves that feels something. And it's like, how long are we going to let this story continue? And okay, so maybe you've nurtured this voice a few times and it's still coming forward. And maybe it's just time to kind of like give it a kick in the butt a little bit more firmly. And I have a lot of resistance to tough love because I was raised in a setting where that was definitely the approach. And it's not that I didn't learn from it. I just don't think that it's loving in nature, even though it could give you the results that you want. And so I've kind of been able to like see that in myself and be a little bit more firm with some, not all, but some of the parts of myself. But I'm such a believer that everything stems from early childhood, and these stories that or past lives, and these stories that we've created about ourselves and the meaning that we attribute to things is rooted there. And those children just want to be seen and acknowledged in their upset and in whatever the root of, I don't need to go into the story and figure out oh, mom or dad did this and my 5-year-old this, but just to say like, oh, hey, little one, like, I see you're scared. I see you're hurt. I see you've been abandoned before. And like, I'm here and I love you. And we're going to move through life. And like, I'm with you. Don't worry. You have a buddy. And so she's kind of brought this new aspect forward of like, all right, come on, little one, like, get it together. We got work to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's cool to like adopt that and have a little balance of both. And, and not like over nurture through just not over nurture and keep them little forever. And so that's something new for me, but that's definitely how I relate to my fears, is kind of seeing what's underneath them and going and addressing those parts of myself that are carrying the meaning and the stories underneath them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's both. I like that it's the nurturing, the acknowledging the parts of yourself that are scared and where that might come from, but then also like, okay, come on, you can do this. Let's just move forward. It reminds me of my boyfriend. He's a trained EFT practitioner, emotional freedom technique, the tapping. And that is very much of the nurturing, loving, like, oh, you have a fear, like, let's talk about it. Let's go back into like the first time you felt that way. Let's bring love and acceptance there and totally love those parts of ourselves. And he was in that mindset for a really long time. And then this past year, he started working with a coach, and he's this male coach who's like much more of that kind of tough love energy. And it was interesting to watch. It was like just as my boyfriend's going through a Saturn return, starting coming into a lot more masculine energy, and that being someone he attracted into his life and wanted to work with. And he got to see like how he would want to analyze almost every little fear thing that would come up or doubt that would come in the way. And his coach was just kind of like, this is totally natural. Anytime you're going from like point A to point B, something that's unknown, like there's going to be this fear, this doubt, and actually what's more important to you right now? How do you want to move forward? And then he would just like hold him accountable to it. So it was interesting to watch both of them coming in.
Yeah.
And they're both needed. And it kind of depends like where you're at in your life and also, of course, the situation.
Yeah, I think a balance of both. Like if we're only in that like, come on, get it together, that's not necessarily going to serve us either. So the balance of both. And that's, again, like the masculine and the feminine and the inner marriage, and discerning which parts of ourselves need which at which times, and being able to provide both for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is actually where it really, I find for people, is helpful to have a coach or a mentor, someone who's there, like helping them to be the guide, to be the person they can talk to about it, to have the accountability. And I'd love to hear just what is happening in your business now, and what you're excited about in your offerings and what you're creating at this time.
Yeah, I'm really open to possibility. Like I have my ideal year and goals planned out, and there's always such a window of whatever spirit wants to bring through. And so there's a few things on the table. I have my 6-month women's group coaching mastermind program called Muse Mastermind that begins mid-January. And that's a 6-month program and has wonderful retreats in the beginning and the end to bring everyone together. And that's half my year. So it's a big piece, and I'm super devoted to that and excited about that and all the women who are going to be joining that. And I've got a few retreats. Sacred embodiment is something that we really focus on, a co-creator of mine and that's, you can find all of this on my website and sign up for updates. And I'm going to be doing something new. And it's interesting being on this call with you, how much the relationship stuff has come through, and just feeling that that's the direction that things are also going in. And so my partner and I are leading a 3-day immersion called The Immaculate Reflection. And it's really about the inner marriage and how we can show up and relating to life with these energies of turned onness and how it affects our relationships. And I'm being like, I don't offer couples counseling, and that's a lot of what's coming forward for me right now with people that I know. And so we'll see where that goes. And so those are the things I'm really excited about, and continuing with the podcast and continuing co-creating with amazing women like yourself. And yeah, just really being open to what spirit has in store for me, and just saying yes when it feels good. So you can always find me on Luna Love Leadership on Facebook and Instagram, and my website is Luna Love Leadership, and I post a lot. And yeah, I'd be excited to connect with your audience more, and continue this conversation. So if there's anything that has been brought forward in this for anyone to just like, I love just a community dialogue around these ideas. So yeah, I'd love to hear from all of you.
Thank you so much. Do you have any closing words for us before I close the call with a little prayer?
The only thing that feels like it's coming forward is the affirmation of yes, I can. That's something that has really supported me, and maybe it'll support someone who wants to adopt that.
Perfect. Oh, with so much gratitude, I just bring my hands to my heart center and tune into my breath, breathing in all these words of wisdom that Luna has shared with us today. May we all of you listening, and just continue to walk with so much courage, so much self-love, just honoring exactly where you're at, knowing that if there is something in this call today that really struck you, to hold that in your heart, to bring that with you out into your day, out into your weeks, to become that inspiration to all the people around you. So with my hands together, I bow with gratitude. Thank you so much, Luna. Thank you, everyone listening. Namaste.